Wholeness, welcome. Josh from Inner and today I have Blair Abee with me. Blair, what's going on today?
Very well, thank you. And I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Well, cool. It's really a good test, I think, for meditation practice. Is we've experienced some technical, I don't know, just a little bit of delays, technical delays, I would say, on figuring things out to begin with. But here we are, and I think it went smooth, and I think both of us handled it okay. So it's always interesting to have these little tests before things start. And I know you're a big meditation practitioner like I am, or we're really into it and interested in it. But before we get to that, I have this question I usually ask folks: is who is Blair Abee, and what kind of work does he do?
Josh, I'm an author. I've written at this point 7 books that are on Amazon. I teach meditation and work with people in that regard. I do a fair amount of podcasting as a guest. I've got a website with an active blog, and if people are interested in that, I can send out a weekly newsletter. So, plus I also do some business consulting as well. So I'm staying busy in my retirement.
Well, right on. So when you reached out to me, I read your story a little bit, or a little blurb, and I reached out to you and I wanted to talk to you first off before we get into meditation stuff about you're a whistleblower. So,
Yes,
what did you do in the corporate world when you used to work, and what
yes,
happened where you needed to whistleblow? And and I need my background refreshed here too.
sure.
Talk about the whistleblowing protections, what that entails, what it doesn't entail, what are the challenges that come along with that, and then also, why it's so important, and just anything else you want to say about it. I'll preface that also with the reason I'm interested. Well, I'll just let you tell your story, and then I'll come back and say why I'm more interested in that, so that way I
Okay,
can throw it to you right away
good.
here.
Excellent. About, well, it's almost 9 years ago, I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, San Diego, to take a very much upscale in my business consulting that I'd been doing for the Small Business Development Center network, part of the Small Business Administration. Took an associate state director job, and it turned out my boss was a psychopath. It's the only time that I'd ever really had a bad boss, but it was awful. She was abusing employees, she was mishandling funds, she was running the program into the ground. And I came from a place that was extremely well run and knew what was needed in order for the program to work. But it was just falling apart. And the people who were supposed to be supervising her, the program, were not paying attention. And she was a expert at smoke and mirrors and kind of keeping them in the dark. So I ended up around the end of the first year of being there. I couldn't deal with it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. And I let them know what was going on. An investigation was done. She was fired, but they fired me too. They said I was a troublemaker. Well, I suppose in a way that was true. I was making trouble by bringing to light the problem, but it was good trouble. It was trouble that needed to be done in order to basically salvage the program and for me to salvage my sanity. After that investigation was done, after they fired me, I appealed and we went before an administrative judge, and they lied up one side and down the other about the situation to the point was where I didn't even recognize what they were talking about. And as a result, the dismissal was considered to be proper, and that ended my 25-year career. My income, went to zero, and I was in a new town, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. It was a really awful situation. And what I ended up doing, among other things, for therapy was taking a deep dive into my meditation practice. And I'd been doing yoga and meditation since, gosh, for almost 40 years. But I took a deep dive into my meditation practice, and really, my experience was one of making soul contact, which is not an experience that I'd ever had before in doing meditation. And I was using journaling as a way for therapy. I'd sit at night and I would kind of write about my experiences, and all of a sudden, at some point, it seemed like there was a shift in my awareness. And I began writing things that really were new to me in a way, new information, new understandings, deeper understandings. And after about 150,000 words, I began to realize that I had material for books. And it was at that point that I started writing my books, which I had never intended to do before. I never intended to be an author. But it was almost as if Spirit was taking me on a different journey, that it was time for me to stop doing what I was doing and to undertake a new journey, which included soul contact and it included doing the writing work that I've been doing ever since then. And really, my core message really to people is that you, me, we all are eternal beings. And that as eternal beings, here as human beings on planet Earth, one of the opportunities is to learn and to make contact with that eternal beingness part of ourselves, which is what I would call soul. That is that part of us that comes to Earth from the other side, enters a biomechanical vehicle of very complex makeup, forgetting who we really are as eternal beings, and that the opportunity in every lifetime is to recontact that part of ourselves in three-dimensional reality as as human beings. So that's what I've been about then for the last 8, 9 years. And again, it was the journaling, it was the deep dive. Looking back on it, I'm glad that what happened happened. It seemed terrible at the time, but from a bigger perspective, it was what was needed and wanted from me as an eternal being in this lifetime to, number one, make soul contact, and number two, to share what I've learned with others.
Well, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. There's plenty in here. And so I want to start off by saying, this, what is it? This question that a teacher I used to follow that's more on a divinity path like you, I would say that he says, what if the worst things that ever happened to me was the greatest gift I've ever been given? And really contemplating that, and it seems appropriate to what happened there. And I applaud your use of truth and kind of commitment to truth, because to me that's the most important thing on the journey. Because if I can't find what's true or not, well, then I'm just wasting time, I feel. There's so much deception and so many dirty tricks and so many half truths and things like that. And if we don't have what's actually honest and real, then to me, it's not, it doesn't, in a way, there's nothing to it. It's just all lies, deception, smoke and mirrors, like you said. So the reason I ask about whistleblowers, there's somebody now doing some disclosure stuff, and he's offering for, now this doesn't really apply to your case as far as I know, but it maybe similar in parallels, is the notion that some of these people join these unacknowledged special access programs thinking that they can actually do some good, but they later find out that what they're doing is now illegal, and they've signed non-disclosure agreements and things like this. So what this guy running this project, he says he's got immunity now for the people, because he said the non-disclosure agreements don't hold because they're illegal. You can't have, secrecy on something that's illegal. So that's what he says and claims. So he's calling for these people in these black projects to come forward, and they will get immunity in exchange for everything they know and protection. So, and then whistleblower status, it sounds like what I'm thinking of whistleblower protections. I don't know the law and stuff behind this, but maybe that just applies for things more involved on a governmental level. It seems like you have to tell me the name of the organization again, but it sounds like it's more of a private sector thing. And so, yeah, I don't know how all this stuff applies. Yeah.
Yeah, non-disclosure agreements are really more in the private sector,
Mhm.
and in the public sector, depending on what kind of organization you happen to be working with. If I had waited another 2 or 3 months, I would have had a permanent status and would have been more protected,
I see.
but didn't realize that. As a result, came out with it when I just couldn't put up with it anymore, and therefore didn't have the protection that first full year of service would have afforded me.
Yeah, it's really, and then we have, this common thing, not common thing, but maybe it is a common, is people in power, there tends to be psychopaths drawn to power. We've got sadists, that also, we've got people, there's a big thing maybe a few years ago, how people are waking up to, what is it called? Where when one's really full of themselves, like narcissism, right?
Yes.
And so unfortunately, some of these archetypes, characters get drawn into power. And yeah, and it seems like you deal a lot with metaphysics, and I'm very fascinated by metaphysics, and I'm well versed. But I tend not to kind of take my own stand on these. I tend to look to others for kind of guidance and ask them questions to see, where they're at or how they view these things. And so my only real conviction is on truth, and the other stuff is just kind of out. The jury's out for me. So I'm still learning and I'm still questioning. And so one of the big challenge, or one of the big things I see with eternalism, and just for me, and I'm not advocating necessarily for or against it, but I think we could both agree the extreme of nihilism is not helpful, right? Where people, it's kind of the exact opposite of eternalism, where people think, oh well, if everything was just wiped out, then there would be no more problems. We can just annihilate existence, annihilate all beingness, and then there's no problems, right? Everything would be great and peaceful. It doesn't work like that, right? And as far as I know, it's impossible
Not on
because
planet Earth.
right, exactly. So, and our intentionality is what's really important. The intentionality behind our thoughts, words, and actions is what creates comic fruit, right? Eventually.
Yes.
So, all right, it will at least be subject to that. But the thing with me for eternalism is that it scares me too. Nihilism, it's easy to see how that can be frightening, that living in that perception or whatever, even if it is a kind of a fantasy. But for eternalism, for one thing, what if I want to get out? Or what if there wants to be some exit from eternal? Too bad, you can't. There's no, it goes on forever. But no, I'm serious. I'm done now. I want to hang it up and exit the wheel of birth and death and suffering and birth and death and suffering, lifetime after lifetime, right? I want to let that go. Nope, you can't, because it's so so that's one of the things. So in a way, it seems like a trap for me. And then the other challenge I have when I contemplate this is that if it goes on forever, there's really no incentive to take action if we carry that out, because we could just do it later because there's no end to it. So what's the point really of doing anything? And the ethical quality, I think, has to come from somewhere else too, because at the end of the day, what is the incentive to also to act ethically if I can just fix it later, right? I can just iron it out later because it never ends. So those are the big challenges I have when I contemplate eternalism. And of course, I'm more of the studying the Buddhist path, which is the middle way between these two, right? So that's where I've fallen on this. But yeah, I just want to. I guess I'll ask you those things I have about eternalism.
Well, I do. My experience is that reincarnation is real and that we do come back over and over and over again as eternal beings, shoehorned into very limited biomechanical vehicles here on planet Earth, and that we're asked to forget our eternal nature, who we are, but have the opportunity to learn about that part of ourselves if we delve into it. And I think meditation, if somebody's interested in contacting their higher self, contacting the soul part of themselves, there's an opportunity to do that through meditation. In fact, I think meditation is the most direct path to that experience, or to illumination, or to enlightenment. And of course, that's what Buddha was all about, was using especially mindfulness meditation practices for that purpose, in order to get off the wheel of, not only of birth and death perhaps, but also of suffering. So I know Buddhists are different, have different notions about reincarnation, but the opportunity from my perspective is in this lifetime, making soul contact, rising up in consciousness, and getting to the point where you've perhaps learned the lessons that come with being on planet Earth, and maybe the next time around you don't come back. You have the opportunity to begin to explore the universe beyond, Earth and three dimensionality in a way that ultimately takes you back to source, or takes you back to God, if you will, or to the all, or whatever it is that you want to call divinity. So, I don't think that it's that one is condemned, if you will, to eternal reincarnation on planet Earth, that there's an opportunity to graduate high school and go on to college, or graduate college and go on to graduate school as a next level of existence. I don't know if that addresses what your concern is, but maybe we're in the ballpark.
Yeah, we are. We're getting there, and definitely we both agree, obviously, that knowing suffering and the end of suffering is the key here. It's just these other little things that could be sussed out. So yeah, the core should be. But I'll just wrap up some of this, put some points on this, is how I've come to see it conceptually, at least, which is not the ultimate, right? So I'm just working with this until I can get to the more ultimate level. There's a distinction, from what I understand, between reincarnation and rebirth. Yeah, reincarnation does imply like this notion of a soul, and rebirth, just, I don't know how to put it. There is no permanent, unchanging self in a way, if we investigate very deeply. So, but there is a birth and rebirth cycle, that seems. I don't know how we would be so special to think that we could get out of these cycles of birth and death. We look at around nature, we look around us, and things are dying and being born, and how we would be individually so much more special to just have everything cease after death. I think we're both in agreement that there's, at least until full awakening, there's some kind of continuation process. What that is and how it plays out, I don't know. One of the best things I've heard is, what, if there's not a self, then who gets reborn? How is there rebirth? And one of the best, most succinct answers I've heard to that is our bad habits. It's one's bad habits get reborn. So that really resonated with that. The other thing is, we're talking about existence now. And so one of the breakthroughs I had when I heard this saying, I think someone asked the Buddha, after awakening, will I exist? Won't I exist? Will I both exist and not exist? Or will I neither exist nor not exist? It's called like a tetralemma. And he says it doesn't even apply. It doesn't fit the case. It just can't really even fathom that, because at least a lot of people I've talked about on spiritual paths, we're kind of mired in these notions of existence and non-existence, or both or neither. And so to try to fathom what it's like without that even applying is just, it's beyond comprehension for me. And not that I need to know, but I found that really interesting. So yeah, and now these notions. Sure. So there's plenty there to chew on. Yeah. Sure.
I think it would be fair to say that with illumination, or with enlightenment, one rises up in vibratory frequency to almost to a different plane of existence. Not that you're not coming and going and so forth, but that you sort of get to a place of non-duality, potentially, where it's obvious that you exist, because by virtue of looking out through your eyeballs, that you exist, that you are conscious, that you are. And that the other thing that's potential is a sense of oneness with the all, or with the universe, which is what an eternal being is. It has a oneness experience, and ultimately, I think, sort of gets absorbed by that source in spiritual evolution of a consciousness. The one thing that we all know is that we are, and we're conscious. And whatever your experience of that is, that's what you make of it. And in each lifetime, you have the opportunity to wake up to that higher plane of existence. Well, if that's true, why not this lifetime? I mean, why waste it? Why waste the opportunity? Why not take advantage of it, if that's something that interests you? Now, it doesn't interest everybody.
Sure.
for sure. It's obvious that it doesn't interest everybody, just on the basis of
Of course.
the nature of life on planet Earth.
Yeah.
But for those people for whom the idea of maybe there's something else going on besides my everyday human existence, maybe I should explore that a little bit. And this guy on the radio or on the podcast said meditation is the most direct path to that experience. Maybe I should at least explore that a little bit and kind of find out what works for me. And that's ultimately the thing that I think everybody who decides to explore has to find is what works for you. Does Buddhism work for you? Does Christ consciousness work for you? This form of meditation work for you? Does that form of meditation work for you? What system works for you? But find your way and your path to satisfy yourself that you are evolving.
It's a really good point. Obviously, none of this would ever be of really much interest to me without meditation. Where this comes down to is self, So I think we have to define a self. From what I understand, there is no permanent, unchanging self if we really deeply investigate this notion. Yes. And the alternative to what you're saying, yes, we normally phrase it, and I think our language might have a lot to do with this, it seems too, is that I know I exist because I see. But the alternative, could it be that seeing is just happening? There doesn't have to be a me attached to seeing. So there's a visual object, there's a physical eye, and then there's contact, and then there's eye consciousness arising. So it's like just a lawful process, and actually lawful processes unfolding due to causes and conditions and laws of nature, right? But if I try to say, okay, well, what is it then? What is it that it's a me? Is it the physicality? Probably not, but we can investigate that even deeper. Am I my physicality? Do I own physicality? Am I in physicality? Or is physicality in me? Okay, so then another kind of realm of our experience goes into feeling, whether every experience is either pleasant, unpleasant, or neither of these. So am I that? Do I own that? Is that in me? Or am I in that? And so, and it's, yeah, that's a real experience that we seem to have, feeling. But then, it gets, when we try to investigate that, it kind of gets muddied into other aspects of our experience, which, and then we have perception. So those same four methods, am I perception? Do I own perception? Am I in perception, or is perception in me? And yeah, perception, what we recognize as whatever we recognize it as. And then we go on to the mental sphere, the mental formations or volitional formations, same thing. Am I those? Do I own those? Am I in those, or are they in me? And then finally, we get to the most subtle is consciousness, right? And that's where I think a lot of us on the spiritual path, we identify that as a kind of that's who we are, really. We're really the consciousness. But the thing is, if I were consciousness, I should be able to control it and say, okay, may my consciousness be thus, may it not be thus. But it seems like, yeah, there's some kind of agency there some of the times, but like I can't choose to just not be conscious all the time, just be conscious all the time and not sleep, or fine tune my consciousness at will all the time. Sometimes I can. So my point for this investigation is that the closer we look and examine, what I just take as an assumption, because I just say, I do this, I do that, that's kind of how our language, and I just have this sense of, oh, this is me. And I'm not saying it's bad to have a self. Of course, we need some kind of sense of ego to move about in the world, to remember our social security number, interact with people. But what if the alternative was just, okay, these are just processes happening? I mean, it's really, really deep and profound. And then we have the senses, right? The five senses plus the mind, internally and externally. Yeah. So this is where I'm going at this is that, this notion of I am, to me, it's kind of a conceit in a way, because it really kind of pumps up, at least for me, it pumps up a spiritual ego, right? If I say I am this, I am that, it's the alternative. I guess where I'm going is it doesn't really need to be there, right? Things can just happen the way they're happening, and at the same time, kind of paradoxically, act skillfully and take responsibility for our thoughts, speech, and action. So yeah, I guess that's how some of the conceptual ways that I'll throw in there. But like, how do you see what is a self? What is a soul? Because
Yes.
these are things we just take for assumption, and then all these other layers are built on top of it. Um, so it's really fundamental what this notion of me is, or an I, me, or mine. And
Right.
then,
I think so. I think the closest that I can get to it, and of course, the problem is words versus experience and whatever it is that's happening or that's known. The closest I can get to consciousness, given your question, is that we are is.
who are we though?
We
You
are,
mean like human?
we are, well, no.
Okay.
I mean, we have bodies. We live in biomechanical vehicles that are very complicated and we motor around. And as human beings, we have to do our lives and have functions, you know, and all of that. But, that's the biomechanical vehicle that I think I entered from the other side as a soul, and that there's a certain amount of duality to that. There's a soul, and then there's humanness. Now, the combination of the two I see as Christ consciousness, which is what I think all of our master teachers experienced and which they were trying to teach their disciples and the rest of us. They were pointing in the direction of a level of consciousness that Krishna had, that Buddha had, that Jesus had, that all of our master teachers had, that awareness, that beingness, that isness that they experienced. Almost all spiritual traditions, except for Buddhism, says that when you leave the planet, when you die, you're going to go on as a coagulated essence of some sort to your next experience, whatever that happens to be. Buddhism has a little bit different of approach to that. But in all cases, the experience of humanness is an experience of isness. And whether you consider it to be a coagulated, once experience, like Buddhism does, or whether you consider it, as many other spiritual traditions consider it, a returning consciousness that comes back over and over again, at some point has the experience of enlightenment or illumination and has an experience of oneness with the all. And that's where duality disappears, is the experience of oneness with the all, where you are just being. You are an isness, and your isness in the middle of this whole three-dimensional reality that we that we've
Yeah.
that we've come to Earth to experience.
I just, for me, maybe I'm trying to pin it down too much, but like I don't understand what a coagulated essence is, or a soul. So I don't really have a definition.
I understand.
Right. And so to me, that's going to change too. So whatever is subject to arise is subject to perish. Right. And so that's kind of the nature of reality as far as I know now. Right. Whatever is
Yep.
subject to arise is subject to perish. And so with that, is that nature of reality, is that going to be something that's going to be lastingly satisfying, or is it going to be unsatisfying? Well, pretty much unsatisfying and dukkha and stressful, because there's no certainty in it. It's changing. It's not certain. It's not secure. So with those conditions, it's going to be hard to have those conditions provide lasting satisfaction. So with that being
Well, that's what
stressful,
but
so
that's
that's
what
right.
suffering is.
Exactly. And so since we have that, does it make sense to take any of that as I, me, or mine? Anything. To me, it doesn't make sense to say any of that is me. This is mine. This is who I am, and I'm made of that. To me, that doesn't make sense, because if there's a choice there, then I don't have to pick that up and take that on as an I, me, and mine, because it's stressful. And so as soon as that gets picked up and identified with as, this is me, or this is mine, this is who I am, I'm made of this. Well, then there's going to be suffering. I mean, that's a kind of a picking up that stress when it doesn't have to be. I don't know. That's kind of how I see it. But this is, again, conceptual, because I just, yeah, if, again, the definition of a soul, and I don't really like approaching things like this, because now I seem like, okay, I'm conceited. Okay, I've understood this, when I obviously haven't totally. I'm on a conceptual level here. And what the core of this is suffering and the end of suffering to me. These just happen to be these minor issues around that, and not so practical ways to approach it. But since we're into metaphysics here, this is how I'm addressing these things. So I think this is, yeah. So,
well, and it really comes down to experience.
it does.
What is your experience? My experience is that I'm an eternal being, that I'm a spark, that came out of the Big Bang as a consciousness, and that until the whole thing collapses, I'll continue to be that, and will continue to explore first that on planet Earth, and when I graduate, I'll be exploring other realms. And to me, that's exciting. On the other side, or in the experience of spirit, there is that sense of oneness and the opportunity to have the experience of oneness, which is what really the soul recognition and the implications of soul recognition is all about. So that's my experience.
I see.
But I know others have a different experience, and that's.
Well, I don't know how I don't remember eternity. You know what I mean? Like,
no, of course.
And so this is right. So this is a big thing in spiritual circles, is that I'm trying to find out, is why do we forget, and why would we choose to forget? But the other thing that a lot of these questions point to, for me, like we started off with, is deception. Could it be possible that there are certain beings that are more advanced than we are, but not entirely advanced or whatever, that have it in their best interest to continually deceive certain other people to make them think they've arrived in spirituality, but in fact, they've got them roped into either reincarnational cycles? We have this notion of like Loosh, and feeding off like life force energy and certain types of energy, keeping people in a state of deception, and not letting them know the full thing. So that's why truth for me is the most important thing, because until I know without a reasonable doubt that this is it, the way it is, then I have to be open to almost considering anything,
Of course.
And the other thing,
that's what
we can experience.
That's what Gnosticism is about. That's what Gnosticism is about. Basically saying reincarnation is a scam, and that it's dark forces that are keeping us bound, to our humanity over and over and over again, and feeding off of our energy. And I think there's probably some truth to that there's more than we can even possibly imagine going on. And what you have to do, as you said, is explore and see what seems to be true for you. Because that's all you've got any control over. That's all you really know, is that you are. And then, like you said, the rest of it is details.
There seems to be experience happening. Right?
Exactly.
That we can all agree on this. Now, how that happens, and if there's permanent unchanging self behind all that experiencing it, I think that's still up for investigation. But yes, we're all seemingly having this experience, and to me, it's just so profoundly mind-blowing that here we are making these little mouth noises, and somehow we understand each other, right? And can have a conversation.
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of. That's right. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't work out so great, and sometimes it does, and everywhere in between. But yeah, no, this is to me, at the end of the day, I mean, this is what it's all about. I mean, I've talked to people who have had great success in their lives, did everything they're told, say, I'll be happy if you do this, this, and this, and it just didn't do it for them. Right. So at the end of the day, like, what is the highest thing we can aspire to? Like, what is the point of all this? What is the highest level that we could, experience? What should we be doing with our time? Are we spending our time well? What's the best use of our time? And for me, it is knowing suffering and the end of suffering, because everything else really isn't going to matter much anyway if I'm in a miserable state where I can't enjoy it or, know it, or am I constantly deceived or only seeing a small portion of what's really going on? And yeah, so to me, this is what this is all about. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about meditation before we start wrapping up here. Tell me about how you got started in your in meditation journey, I guess, and what kind of practices you do, and how the path has been along the way from when you
Yes.
started out to where you are today.
I started meditation, gosh, 1972, when I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, went to an ashram in San Francisco, began doing yoga. And of course, meditation was part of the yoga, and I began doing meditation, and I've been doing it ever since. But it really wasn't until about 8, 9 years ago, and we were talking about my experience of whistleblowing and so forth, that I took a deep dive into my meditation practice. I used a spiritual journaling technique. I didn't realize it was spiritual journaling at the time. I was just writing for therapy. And at some point, I began to write things that weren't my normal understanding. People talk about downloads. It was kind of like a download. And ultimately, I realized that was an introduction to my soul, and the information that was going through my fingers onto the keyboard and into the hard drive was a higher form of understanding than I had ever had before. It was really a direct experience of spirit. And so that's what ended up, after about 150, 200,000 words of doing that, I realized I had material for books. And that's when I began to write my books and began to share my ideas, my understanding, my experience, my realization the eternality of us. And I developed a type of meditation called higher consciousness meditation, which is not about mind training, which most meditation practices are about, trying to tame the wild horse, if you will. But the mind doesn't really want to be tamed. It really wants to be in charge. It wants to chatter, chatter, chatter. It wants to reflect on the past. It wants to anticipate the future. It wants to try and protect the physical being that we are. What I discovered as a result of the higher consciousness meditation practice, that I provide a lot of detail in my book, the meditation book, and how to do it, is the sort of bypassed all of that and went directly for illumination, an experience of illumination. And it's an inquiry type of meditation that offers open-ended statements that you wait to see how the universe, your soul, responds. In other words, you offer the opportunity to have that inner voice, the kingdom of God that's within you, as Jesus said, speak to you and become friends with you and offer solace and a way out of suffering. So that's what higher consciousness meditation is all about. Now, I do a longer meditation, sit down meditation in the morning, a longer sit down meditation in the evening before I go to bed. And then I use mindfulness practices during the day in order to stay tuned up. So I'll say to myself things like, peace, be still, as a way of just taking a breath. Or as I go out my front door, I have a little angel there, and I touch the angel just as a reminder of my spiritual essence in addition to my human essence. It's a trigger, if you will, to remember to be, as opposed to doing. And one of the things I found out, interestingly enough, as a result of taking that deep dive into meditation, is that my ego actually was happy to be relieved of a job that's not its job to be doing, which is to be in control. That it's happy to sort of settle into its job, which is maintenance of the physical form and keeping it out of trouble, but not being in charge, but instead being a tool or a part of the vehicle, if you will, that is the human experience. So that's how I would kind of, in terms of the meditation practice that I developed, it is, and other people have said, "Oh, this is really helpful because I've spent all of these years trying to tame my mind, and my mind doesn't want to be tamed, and you never know when it's going to arise out of nowhere, and it's chatter, 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 and it's so hard, and people just give up." Well, I think there's a more direct path to it. And that's really what I think I have to offer in terms of that tool and some of my mindfulness practices that people, if they want to explore that approach, and it's an approach, a methodology. If they want to explore that as a methodology, it seems to work for some people and certainly worked for me as I went through the process of development.
Well, very cool. This won't show in the final video, but as you were speaking, and it's almost like this psychedelic effect where certain areas of the background are blurring, and yeah, it's kind of glitching, and the screen is kind of flashing in certain areas or not. So it's a really interesting experience that I'm having here that nobody else will get to see. So that's really things like this happen to me
Yes.
quite a bit, actually.
Good.
Interesting phenomenon, right?
Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. So we've got, you said, I love this physical reminder because that's one of the translations of sati. It's usually translated as mindfulness, but it's also remembering, right? And I love how these physical objects we can have that can help us remember. And there's a Zen saying, the most important thing is to remember the most important thing. So I
To
love
remember
that too,
to
right?
remember. I mean, it's remembering
Right,
to remember.
exactly. It's so wild to how
And
much
if
we've
you can,
forgotten. Yeah.
that's right. If you can set up your life in such a way, I mean, I've got these little notes, here on my computer as reminders. One of them says, breathe Christ consciousness. Just breathe, but breathe Christ consciousness as oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm doing what I'm doing. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Remembering and rising up in vibratory frequency, which is sublime. It's like, it's a blessing in a way.
Okay, so the other thing, what you said about the mind, and it was spot. Well, before that, I had similar experiences when I was in the corporate world, and I was so grateful that that kind of all fell apart for me
Yes.
because it was a great gift. Actually, it seemed like disaster at the time, but it was actually such a great blessing in a way. So
And
you know what I'm
but you
talking
don't
about.
think that's how, you don't realize until
Yeah,
you've kind of got some distance from it. If you've
exactly,
used it as the opportunity to wake up,
exactly.
if you've
That's
used it
right.
as the opportunity to
Very good.
wake up, then it's a great opportunity. And you look back on it as I do, and I say to those people who mistreated me, thank you.
Yeah,
It was what I needed
yeah.
in order to wake up. I needed some trauma. Not everybody needs trauma in order to wake up. But if you have that, take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, very well put, and thank you for clarifying that and giving that key distinction. Because yeah, if we just say, "Oh yeah, I'm just gonna, just cause disasters and everything will be great for me," no, that's not what
No,
I meant. So I
no, no.
appreciate that. Yeah, exactly. So it has to be, yeah, exactly. There was a lot of work, at least at the beginning, for sure. Now, before we start wrapping up here, I want to ask because I asked different meditation teachers. You mentioned some of this stuff about the mind, or at least the
Yes.
thinking mind. What is the kind of wise relationship you see to the thinking mind? And if you are doing mind training, but I know you offered an alternative to that.
Yes.
Maybe talk about how that influences the thinking mind, or at least your relationship to the thinking mind. And if you
Right.
ever do work with the thinking mind, how do you do so? Yeah.
Well, as I said, my experience is that in the shift in consciousness that I had, I would call it awakening, in the shift of consciousness that I had, and in the practices that I've developed that are intended to lead people to an experience of illumination, when that happens, it's like the mind goes, thank you. It's almost as if the mind is sort of acknowledging a lift of the burden of being in charge of everything, and instead letting spirit do its job, which is your best interest, your maximum evolution and growth spiritually in this human experience that we have. And the mind doesn't have to be constantly alert and trying to keep damage from occurring, which is end up as is what suffering is all about.
And this takes trust. This takes trust. This takes trust, right? So in faith, not in a sense of I have to believe something, but faith
No.
that it's okay, right? Or to talk a little bit about faith and trust when it
Yes.
comes to this, because I found it's really important. Yeah.
I think the faith is a trust in yourself that you and spirit have the highest intention for you, and that you will find a way for that to occur. It's not a faith in the methodology, it's a faith in yourself that you will find a way to wake up if that is something that you're interested in. Or if you're already awake, that you will continue to evolve to higher and higher frequencies of experience. And again, I think that's what our master teachers were trying to teach us and show us. Not that they were gods and they were the only ones, but they were ones who were advanced. They're our elder brothers saying, okay, here's an opportunity. I'm not your savior. I'm merely your guide. And here's some things that I learned. Take advantage of them if you want to.
It's beautifully put. Yeah, and I can definitely echo that. And this notion that there are skillful things, there are unskillful things, and if we tend to act in skillful manners, speak in skillful manners, intend and think in skillful ways, then the results will tend to be skillful. So yes, and we can learn from we stand on the shoulders of giants and learn from them. But ultimately, we have to do the work. We have to go through it,
We have
and
to.
we're responsible for it. That's right. So, and then we can easily set aside what doesn't work and pick up what does work,
Yeah.
as far as long as we need it, and then until maybe we can let go of it too. So
Yes.
yeah. All right, Blair, this has been great. I appreciate you putting up with my prodding questions here.
No, hey, I've enjoyed our conversation. I
I
even
figured.
enjoyed the challenging element of it because it gave me a chance to kind of go deeper into what I what I know for myself to be true.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Exactly. And there's like I just said, it's to be seen and known for each wise one for themselves, right? So
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, tell people how they can get in touch with you. What kind of products? I know you mentioned books you have.
Yes.
Do you have any courses? Do you do mentoring and coaching? Any events you have coming up? Anything else you want to draw people's attention to? And then if you'd like to leave the listeners with the final message in me.
Yeah. Um, well, it's all of that. I have the books. I've got some courses. You can go to my website, which is blairabee.com. Last name spelled ABEE.com, and you can find the books, the courses. Um, there's a spiritual quiz there that you can take that kind of gives you a sense of what your spiritual personality is, and even offers some ideas of how you can enhance that, some direction you can take if you're a seeker or if you're a healer, or um, and also people can get on my newsletter email list, and I'll send them an inspirational message once a week. So take advantage of the opportunity if things that I've said seem worth exploring, to just go to the website and to explore what's there, and to get on my email list and to kind of delve into that some.
Great. I will actually, before you get to like a final message, one other question occurred to me that
Sure.
I'm very curious about: discernment. So when you're getting downloads and I don't know, some people might call it automatic writing, or even maybe a type of channeling,
Yes.
what kind of advice do you have to check the information, whether there's where it's coming from and what the intentions, if there is a direct being behind it or a group of beings, how to know, like, either both the legitimacy of it and what their intentions are for it. Like, if they actually have pure, straight, true, honest intentions, or there's ulterior motives maybe involved in what's coming through.
I don't know anything much about others. All I really know is that sense that I have of my higher self or my soul. And that's the thing that I trust. And in a way, it's obvious that it's not just your human mind at work. If you explore that and if you have that experience, it's obvious. There's really no checking that you have to do. do, because all of a sudden you've had your direct experience of spirit. And that's different from the human experience of life. So I think we're back to trust and faith in yourself, that you're on the right path, and that what's coming to you, if you're getting downloads, seems of the light or of the dark. And it's easy to tell. You can tell
Okay.
if it's light or dark.
Okay. One of the reasons I asked,
Wherever it's coming from, you can tell,
sure,
is it from the light or is it from the dark?
because I hear these reports of some people saying they have beings appear to them, but they appear cloaked in as a being of light, but actually behind that there's something else going on, And yeah, if they did it unsophisticatedly, so to speak, hypothetically, theoretically here, then if they did it too direct and too obvious, then they might get written off. But as we can see, maybe in the political arena or some things that it may be on Earth here, that there's a lot of truth and good stuff mixed in, but a little bit, a little bit here, a little bit there, that's a little bit off.
Yeah.
So it's just the kind of the different tactics of people in the intelligence agency is very sophisticated. A lot of them are very subtle, and a lot of them are very long term. So that's why I ask for discernment skills, because I hear other people mentioning these things that
well, you
they're
just have
actually
to keep checking into your heart and to see what your heart and your gut responds to,
sure.
and explore it. And you might go down a rabbit hole, but at some point you'll go, oh no, that's not, no, never mind.
It happens. Oh yeah, and there's many rabbit holes too. There can be. Yeah.
Wrong direction on the path. Let me get back where I was.
Yeah, and it's a very important skill for me to admit that I've been wrong. It
Sure.
takes a lot of courage and humility to admit that. And even waking up in the beginning, learning that most everything that I've been taught has been not exactly the way it's been presented. Right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
other stuff going on, and so
Right.
unlearning a lot of things was a huge part of my path too. So it
Yeah,
still is.
you can't go on anything else but what you know to be true. That's all.
That's
I
right,
mean,
and that's
all the outside information is just information.
exactly.
Your experience is your experience, and that's really what you can trust.
Exactly. And that's why that trust is so important.
Yeah.
All right, Blair, I appreciate it again. Thanks for joining. Again, the website is blairabee.com, ABEE.com. Correct?
Thank you. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
All right. Bye now.
Namaste.